Dean, we were all very saddened to hear about the tragic death of your son.
Well, luckily, Jeannie and I are both fatalist.
In 1987, Dean Martin lost his son in a tragic plane crash. From that day on, the King of Cool was never the same. He retreated from public life, turned down million-dollar offers, and spent his final years in quiet solitude. But when he died on Christmas Day 1995, he left behind something extraordinary, a fortune that would change his family's lives forever. This is the story of how a poor Italian immigrant's son built an empire and the emotional legacy that came with it. Dean Martin was born on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio. His original name was Dino Paul Crocetti, and his parents were Italian immigrants trying to make a better life in America. As a young boy, Dino only spoke Italian, not English, when he started school at age 5. This became a big problem. The other kids teased him for his broken English and his Italian name. Dino felt like an outsider and had to find ways to protect himself. That's when he learned to use humor. He discovered that making people laugh could turn their teasing into friendship. This skill would later help him win over audiences around the world. By the time he was a teenager, he found a way to escape his struggles by playing the drums. It gave him joy and set the stage for his love of performing. At 16, Dino dropped out of school. He felt he didn't need formal education and decided to work instead. His first jobs were tough. He worked in a steel mill where the work was hot, dirty, and exhausting. He also tried boxing, calling himself Kid Crochet. He fought 12 matches and later joked he only won one of them. Boxing left him with scars, broken knuckles, and a crooked nose, but it also taught him resilience. Dino wasn't afraid to take risks. During Prohibition, he bootlegged liquor, smuggling alcohol when it was illegal. He also worked as a blackjack dealer in secret gambling clubs. These jobs introduced him to the nightlife and the people who lived on the edge, giving him a toughness and charm that stayed with him forever. By the early 1940s, Dino started singing in nightclubs. He called himself Dino Martini, inspired by a famous opera singer. His smooth, relaxed singing style caught people's attention. A bandleader named Sammy Watkins noticed him and suggested he change his name to Dean Martin. This marked the start of a new chapter in his life. Not everything came easy. When Dean performed at a fancy New York club, he completely flopped. It was embarrassing, but he didn't give up. He kept singing, learning, and improving. During this time, he met a young comedian named Jerry Lewis. In 1945, Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis met for the first time at the Glass Hat Club in New York City. At that time, Martin was already a popular nightclub singer known for his smooth voice and charming style. Jerry Lewis, on the other hand, was just starting out as a comedian and struggling to find his place. Their first meeting happened by chance during one of Martin's performances. Lewis, in his usual playful way, began interrupting Martin's act with silly jokes and wild antics. At first, it seemed like it might ruin the show, but something unexpected happened. The audience loved it. They laughed so much that both men realized they had stumbled onto something special. After that night, they started performing together in different clubs in New York. The pairing of Martin's cool, relaxed singing with Lewis's over-the-top humor was fresh and exciting. Audiences couldn't get enough of their mix of music and comedy. Their big break as a duo came on July 25, 1946, at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. They were originally booked as separate acts, but when another performer canceled, they decided to team up. That night, Lewis dressed as a busboy and crashed Martin's set, pretending to clean tables, dropping dishes, and making ridiculous jokes. The chaos was hilarious, and Martin played along. Their act turned into a perfect mix of music and comedy. The audience went wild, and even the club owner, who had been nervous about the idea, admitted they were a hit. That performance put them on the map, and soon they were performing in some of the biggest clubs in the country, like New York's Copacabana. Their act kept evolving, with Martin's smooth songs and Lewis's unpredictable humor blending perfectly. They didn't rely on a strict script, which made every show feel fresh and fun. Audiences couldn't get enough of their energy and originality. By 1949, they were so popular that NBC offered them their own radio show, The Martin and Lewis Show. It became one of the most listened-to programs in America, bringing their unique humor into people's homes. As their fame grew, Hollywood noticed them. Their first movie, My Friend Irma, came out in 1949. Martin played a charming singer, while Lewis brought his usual silly antics to the role of his sidekick. Even though they weren't the main stars of the film, audiences loved them. Their chemistry on screen was just as strong as it was on stage, and the success of the movie made them Hollywood stars. Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis changed television forever when they starred in the Colgate Comedy Hour from 1950 to 1955. Their teamwork and sense of humor were unlike anything people had seen before. They didn't just stick to the script. They joked, ad-libbed, and made every performance feel alive and unpredictable. This made their show a huge hit. Their first show on September 17, 1950, was a big deal. It was filmed at the Park Theater in New York City and had a massive budget of $3 million, about $36 million today. The network believed in their talent, and it paid off. Their episodes had the highest ratings and even beat other famous stars like Eddie Cantor. What made Martin and Lewis special was how they broke the rules of TV at the time. They didn't just follow the norms. They created their own unique style that captivated audiences. They made up jokes on the spot, and audiences loved it. In one episode, Lewis interrupted Martin singing by shouting, "Who ordered the steak?" It wasn't planned, but everyone laughed, and the moment became legendary. Their shows were a mix of music, comedy, and silly sketches that made fun of movies and TV. Martin's smooth singing balanced perfectly with Lewis's crazy antics, creating a style of entertainment that inspired shows like Saturday Night Live years later. Their success on TV led them straight to Hollywood. Between 1949 and 1956, they made 16 movies, many of which were huge hits. Their first starring role was in At War with the Army in 1950. The film only cost $560,000 to make but earned over $3.3 million, proving how much people love them. Another big success was The Stooge in 1952. This movie was special because it felt personal. It was about a struggling singer, played by Martin, whose career takes off after teaming up with a goofy partner, played by Lewis. It made $5.5 million and showed how well they could combine comedy with heartfelt moments. By 1951, they were the most popular entertainers in the world. That year, they earned $1 million, an amount equal to more than $123 million today. Their money came from everywhere: nightclubs, movies, and TV. They made $25,000 a week performing live, and some of their TV episodes paid them as much as $100,000. What made their rise so amazing was how fast it happened. In just 5 years, they went from being unknown to being the biggest stars in the world. Part of their success came from their smart business decisions. They made sure they had control over their careers, like sharing profits from their movies and having the power to approve scripts. However, their partnership didn't last forever. By 1952, Dean was growing tired of being seen as just the straight man. Jerry got the big laughs, and Dean felt like his role was simply to set him up for jokes. During the filming of Three Ring Circus in 1954, Dean's frustration boiled over. He turned to Jerry and said, "Hey Jerry, what am I around here, a fifth wheel? If I'm not important to the act anymore, just let me know." Dean's feelings weren't without reason. In Three Ring Circus, he only got to sing 2 songs, one to a group of caged animals and the other to Jerry, while Jerry had the main role as usual. Over time, Dean felt less like a partner and more like an afterthought. The breaking point came in 1956 during the planning of The Delicate Delinquent. Dean was supposed to play a policeman but refused, saying, "Start looking, boy." It was clear he had had enough of playing second fiddle. The two were also very different as people. Jerry was a perfectionist, rehearsing endlessly and controlling every detail, while Dean was relaxed and didn't take things as seriously. Dean once joked, "I've got it made. I don't have to work anymore." I've got Jerry Lewis, but their differences caused tension on the Colgate Comedy Hour. Jerry insisted on long rehearsals, but Dean would leave early to play golf. During one moment, Jerry shouted, "You're nothing but a goddamn no-talent bum." The rift between them only grew, and by the time they filmed Hollywood or Bust, they barely spoke. Dean even referred to Jerry as the monkey, showing how little respect he had left for him. Jerry's growing control over their act didn't help. During Three Ring Circus, Jerry told a producer, "You better let me go with him alone. I can get more out of him." Moments like this made Dean feel pushed aside. Tensions peaked when both refused to show up on the first day of filming. Dean hated how the script focused on Jerry, a clear sign of how far apart they had drifted. The public didn't make things easier. Jerry got most of the praise, while Dean was often overlooked. One critic claimed Jerry could succeed with any straight man, which hurt Dean deeply. During Three Ring Circus, a group of kids asked Dean, "Hey, mister, where's Jerry Lewis?" Witnesses said the look on Dean's face that day was heartbreaking. Things got worse during the promotion of Living It Up in 1954. A photo in Look magazine cropped Dean out entirely, leaving only Jerry. It felt like proof to Dean that he was being pushed aside. At press events, reporters focused almost entirely on Jerry. During one interview, a frustrated Dean snapped, "Don't mind me, I'm just the guy who sings." Even their chemistry began to fade. At a photo shoot on July 18, 1954, they barely spoke, and Dean refused to look at Jerry. The photos showed them smiling, but it was all for show. Their partnership was crumbling. By early 1955, during the filming of Artists and Models, tensions exploded. On February 14th, Jerry insisted on retakes, frustrating the crew and Dean. During a break, Jerry approached Dean to discuss changes, and Dean snapped in front of everyone. He yelled, "You can talk about love all you want to me, you're nothing but a dollar sign." Jerry, usually quick with comebacks, was silent. He walked away, leaving everyone stunned. It was clear their partnership was broken. By the time they started Hollywood or Bust in 1956, their relationship was beyond repair. On April 3rd, the first day of filming, they didn't talk unless they had to. Director Frank Tashlin described the atmosphere as Arctic. The crew even filmed some scenes separately to keep them apart. In one moment on May 2nd, Jerry made a joke about Dean's singing, and Dean responded with a cold glare. Co-star Pat Crowley broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the tension. Their final performance came on July 25, 1956, at the Copacabana in New York, exactly 10 years after their debut as a duo. The room was packed with stars like Frank Sinatra and Humphrey Bogart. The audience gave them thunderous applause as they performed classic routines, including the Awo Caveman sketch, and Dean sang That's Amore. But the magic wasn't the same. Their banter felt forced, and their comedy lacked its old spark. The most emotional moment came when they performed their final duet as partners, singing You and Me, a song that celebrated their bond as the greatest partners, buddies, and pals. Many in the audience were moved to tears, and the show ended with a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. When Dean Martin split from Jerry Lewis in 1956, people thought his career might be over. However, instead of fading away, he surprised everyone by becoming a huge star on his own. It wasn't easy at first. Rock and roll was taking over, and many crooners were struggling to stay relevant. Martin didn't try to change who he was. He leaned into his smooth, easygoing style while also trying out serious acting roles. His first movie without Lewis, 10,000 Bedrooms, 1957, didn't do well, but it was the start of something bigger. Things turned around for Martin in 1958 when he starred in The Young Lions, a war movie with Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift. This was a big moment for him, as it showed he could handle serious roles, not just comedy. Critics loved his performance, and it helped him rebuild his reputation as an actor. That same year, he worked with Frank Sinatra in Some Came Running, proving he was more than just a funny guy. He was a real movie star. At the same time, Martin's music career was booming. He signed with Capitol Records and released hit after hit. One of his most famous songs, Volare, came out in 1958 and became a huge success. It climbed the charts in the US and the UK, making him a favorite with fans all over the world. Then, in 1964, he released Everybody Loves Somebody, a song that became his biggest hit. It even knocked the Beatles off the top of the charts, showing that Martin still had what it took to be a superstar. Dean Martin's life changed forever when he joined the Rat Pack in the late 1950s. This group of entertainers, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford, weren't just performers. They were the kings of Las Vegas and the face of Hollywood glamour. Martin had already made a name for himself as a singer and actor after his comedy duo with Jerry Lewis, but being part of the Rat Pack took his fame to a whole new level. The Rat Pack shows at the Sand Hotel were legendary. They didn't just sing, they joked, teased each other, and made the audience feel like they were part of something special. Martin's smooth voice and laid-back charm were a perfect fit. Songs like That's Amore and Ain't That a Kick in the Head became his signature hits, and his cool, relaxed style won over everyone. The group's bond was real, but it wasn't always perfect. Martin and Sinatra, for example, were great friends, but their strong personalities sometimes clashed. Still, their chemistry on stage made every performance unforgettable. While he was wowing audiences on stage, Martin was also making waves in Hollywood. In Ocean's 11, 1960, Dean Martin played Jimmy Foster, part of a group planning a daring casino heist. The film, which starred the entire Rat Pack, became a classic and inspired the modern remakes with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. Later, in Robin and the Seven Hoods, 1964, Martin teamed up with Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby in a fun twist on the Robin Hood story, set in Prohibition-era Chicago. He didn't just act in these films, he sang too, showing off the same charm that made him a star in Vegas. Martin's cool, effortless style made him a Las Vegas icon. People loved how he'd sip a drink on stage while singing hits like Everybody Loves Somebody, which even knocked the Beatles off the charts in 1964. He made every show feel spontaneous, joking with the audience, and never taking himself too seriously. His performances at the Sands Hotel drew big crowds, from celebrities to politicians, all eager to see the King of Cool in action. Dean Martin became a star on television with The Dean Martin Show, which aired from 1965 to 1974. Over 9 years, it became one of the most popular shows on NBC, running for 264 episodes. The show was a mix of comedy, music, and celebrity guests, and what made it so special was Martin himself. He had a laid-back style, always looking cool and relaxed, often holding a drink he joked was apple juice. People loved him because he seemed like someone who didn't take life too seriously. On the show, Martin didn't just sing hits like Everybody Loves Somebody, and that's amore. He also showed off his funny side. There were scripted jokes, but he loved to improvise, making each episode feel fresh and unpredictable. Big stars like Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Orson Welles were regular guests, and their playful banter with Martin made viewers feel like they were part of a private Hollywood party. The show became so big that Martin won a Golden Globe in 1966 for his performance, proving just how much people loved his easygoing charm. But as time went on, the show's ratings started to slip. Instead of giving up, the producers came up with a brilliant idea: Dean Martin's Celebrity Roast. This new format featured Martin and a group of celebrities poking fun at one famous person in a friendly, lighthearted way. The first roast aired in 1974, honoring Bob Hope. It was such a hit that the roasts became a regular event even after the main show ended. Martin was the perfect host for these roasts. He made everyone laugh with his sharp, witty jokes while keeping the mood fun and relaxed. The roasts featured actors, musicians, and even politicians, and they gave people a chance to see celebrities joking with and about each other in ways they couldn't anywhere else. The humor was edgy but never mean-spirited, and viewers loved seeing stars show their playful sides. Dean Martin's personal life was as interesting as his career. He was married 3 times and had 8 children. His first wife, Betty McDonald, married him in 1941. They had 4 children: Craig, Claudia, Gail, and Diana. Their marriage ended in divorce. In 1949, just as Dean was becoming famous, even after the divorce, Dean stayed close to his children, making time for them despite his busy life. Later in 1949, Dean married Jean Beggar. This marriage lasted 24 years and felt more stable than his first. They had 3 children together: Dean Paul, REI, and Gina. Even though Dean and Jean divorced in 1973, they stayed friends. They worked together to raise their kids and supported each other during tough times. Dean's third marriage in 1973 was to Catherine Hahn. Catherine was younger and worked as a receptionist when they met. Dean adopted her daughter Sasha and treated her like his own child. However, their marriage didn't last long, and they divorced in 1976. Despite the breakup, Dean remained a caring father to Sasha. Through all these changes, Dean's role as a father stayed constant. He had 8 children, and no matter how busy or famous he became, he always tried to be there for them. His daughter Dina often talks about her father's love for family. She remembers having dinner together and seeing how much he cared. Growing up, she was surrounded by big Hollywood stars like Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe, but what stood out the most was Dean's warmth and humor as a dad. Dean made sure all his kids felt connected, even though they came from different marriages. His son REI once said that their father brought the family together and made them feel like one. Sasha, his adopted daughter, was treated the same as everyone else. This shows how much Dean valued family, no matter how complicated his life was. Dean also had a charm that attracted many women, leading to famous romances with stars like Angie Dickinson and Dina Shore. These relationships often made headlines and added to his image as the king of cool. But behind the public persona, he was a man who cared deeply about his children. In 1987, his son Dean Paul Martin died in a plane crash. Dean Paul was flying a military jet during a training mission when it crashed into a mountain. He was only 35. The loss broke Martin's heart. Friends noticed he became quieter and more withdrawn. He also struggled with drinking after the tragedy. This event changed everything for him. After his son's death, Martin decided to stop performing. He turned down offers and even ended a reunion tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. He didn't want the pressure of public life anymore. Instead, he focused on simple things that made him happy. Golf became one of his favorite hobbies. He spent afternoons on the golf course, enjoying the peace and quiet. He also loved watching old Western movies, which reminded him of a simpler time. These quiet routines brought him some comfort in his later years. Martin stayed away from Hollywood. He spent his time with close friends and enjoyed the things that brought him joy. His decision to retire wasn't just about leaving the spotlight. It was about finding peace after such a painful loss. By the time he passed away on Christmas Day in 1995, he had built a fortune of $30 million. This incredible wealth came from decades of success as a singer, actor, and comedian. He first became famous in the 1940s when he teamed up with Jerry Lewis. Together, they made people laugh with their mix of comedy and music. But after they split in 1956, Martin's career only grew bigger. He released hit songs like That's Amore and Everybody Loves Somebody, and appeared in popular movies like Rio Bravo and Airport. Dean Martin didn't just focus on his career. He also made smart investments in real estate. In the 1970s, he bought a house in Beverly Hills for $120,000. Over time, he expanded it into a 12,000-square-foot mansion where he lived until he died. The house was sold a few years after his passing for $1.35 million, and by 2003, it sold again for $2 million. Today, the site has been rebuilt into a modern mansion worth nearly $28 million, showing how much the property's value has grown. Martin also owned a stylish home in Palm Springs, which he sold shortly after his death for $25,000. These homes were not just where he lived. They were investments that grew in value over time. To make sure his family would be cared for after he was gone, Martin created the Dean Martin Family Trust. This trust managed the royalties from his music, TV shows, and licensing deals. It made sure his family continued to benefit from his hard work. Shows like The Dean Martin Show still air today, bringing in money and keeping his name alive. Merchandise and other licensing deals also help keep his legacy strong. His 8 children, Craig, Claudia, Gail, Diana, Dean Paul, Richie, Gina, and Sasha, faced the challenge of dividing his estate. Each child received a share based on their relationship with him and their individual needs. Diana, for example, has worked hard to preserve her father's memory, which may have influenced her portion. Managing Dean Martin's estate wasn't easy after his death. There were rights to his music and image to take care of. His children had to deal with not just their loss, but also the financial details. Even after his death, Dean Martin's name remains iconic. His estate has kept up with changing times. Streaming platforms and social media have helped younger generations discover his music and movies. In 2023, a major deal was made with iconic artist group to manage his legacy. This group aims to introduce Dean Martin to modern audiences by creating merchandise, licensing deals, and even movies about his life. These projects not only keep his memory alive, but also provide ongoing income for his heirs. One of Dean's children, Deanna Martin, has played a big role in honoring his legacy. Born in 1948, she grew up surrounded by her father's fame. She performed with him as a child and now continues to celebrate his work. She tours around the world, singing his famous songs and sharing stories about him. She even wrote a memoir, Memories Are Made of This, Dean Martin Through His Daughter's Eyes, which gives readers a glimpse of what life was like with him. The memoir is now being turned into a movie. Deanna also organizes the annual Dean Martin Festival in his hometown of Steubenville, Ohio. This event celebrates her father's life and helps young musicians with scholarships. The deal with iconic artist group has brought fresh ideas for keeping Dean Martin relevant. They're creating products inspired by his style and exploring ways to tell his story through film and music. These efforts show how his charm and talent continue to inspire people. By combining his classic appeal with modern marketing, His legacy reaches new fans while keeping longtime admirers connected to his work.